think about the future of journalism, and I heard you mention the word resilience, and I worry when I hear about the future of journalism, because I just wonder how resilient my fellow journalists are in the face of change. And I think I told you a bit of an anecdote beforehand. When I was 10, I used to sell my local newspaper door to door. When I was 18, I got my first story published in that same paper. And there seemed to be a progression there, but that's all been scrambled by the internet and technology. I look at the sheer firepower that's there if I want to be a storyteller, but then I wonder how the hell I'm going to make money. So I start really with you and Mark and Áine, really, about how will Kinzen help make journalism viable for the journalists? Start with you, Mark.
So I think we do this thing in journalism where we think about the form it takes, newspaper, think about the title we have, correspondent, we think about the business model being advertising. And you know what, if you want to save journalism, you wouldn't start here, right? We get connected to the medium, used to be said was the message. That's the terrible way of thinking about the future. We have to think about a reinvention of ourselves. We think about the user of our journalism, the communities we serve. I mean, think about the average person, right? We're not competing with each other in journalism. We're competing with sleep, parenting, work, commuting, because the individuals that we serve have incredibly busy lives. They've got so many things in their life that help them, nudge them toward positive outcomes for health and fitness. But there's no one actually thinking about the user first, the human-centered journalism. Because if we thought about that, we would see journalism as a very healthy future. I don't think newspapers in the form of a physical paper will survive, but public service journalism will survive. I think it's a good move to move toward reader revenue. That is, getting people to a stage where they say to themselves, it's worth paying for content. They know this with Netflix and Spotify. We have a whole generation of young people conditioned to pay for quality content, so that's a good thing. But the problem is, what about the public square? What about the stuff that is free, that we need to still come together around shared facts? And I think that's where we need to do the most amount of work to build the kind of experiences that take account. And it may be going back to the past. Newsletters, one of the most effective ways of communicating with people. Can you imagine email, right? Think about blogs. I think we're going to see an explosion of local and niche publishers who are maybe one or two journalists in a town covering a niche. Now, more than ever, you can develop monetization around that. You only need 1,000 true fans to pay you €5 a month, and you got a business. If you've got to worry about whether your newspaper is going to go out of business, then you've got a whole different set of problems that are really not to do with the community that you serve. So I think there is potentially a renaissance if we can just get our heads around the needs of the people and the communities we serve and stop thinking about ourselves. Journalism is some vaunted institution.
That's the thing, Áine. I was listening to your talk there, and you mentioned how newsrooms are often led by middle-class people, which enforces a middle-class outlook. And I often wonder, do journalists themselves actually think about the reader when they're writing a story, or are they just doing it for themselves? And how do journalists need to kind of rethink their own personal brand in this new age?
Yeah, I think just traditionally we've always thought about the supply of our content, producing great, powerful, quality journalism, but probably not enough about the demand, the appetite, the needs of the community. So we've somewhere along the way got the balance wrong between that demand and supply. And I think what's good, and with Kinzen's philosophy and many others, is that outside-in approach. What does it look like to go into your communities and ask those questions and have a people-powered public service remit? But what does it mean for media companies, for tech companies, to actually build technology hand in hand with people? Now, you can only do that by having people on your team, as is the case in Kinzen, where we have user advocates who are every day thinking about the needs, the motivations, how are people incentivized, how can we actually help them in their daily lives, as opposed to, just running on instinct and assumptions. And I think that technology approach is probably what we now need to bake into our journalism. But I think you're seeing the grassroots of that with the Hurricanes, the data correspondents of the world, the tertiarized medias. There is now an effort to do that from the outside in, from community, from the ground up, and do it a little bit differently, where we start with appetite, needs, motivations, rather than simply supply journalism.
The elephant in the room is misinformation and fake news and how we react to things. And we're 2 months after the events in Christchurch. What happened there happened. I mean, you can't call that misinformation, because what happened was grotesquely broadcast live to the world and proliferated in moments. But looking at the situation where we're in, I mean, I don't know, it's a strange time for humanity, but information has never been more prevalent, but we're still having to discern truth from lie. And I suppose, Jane, I just want to ask you about what you're doing at DCU in terms of, you have a €2.4 million EU project called Provenance. Can you tell us how that's going to work and how that's going to help fight the misinformation we're dealing with?
Yeah, sure. So it builds on the same kind of concepts that Áine was talking to us earlier about resilience. But what we're looking at is really trying to build resilience among citizens. So we know that the social media algorithms, we know that Facebook in particular, that the affordances of those algorithms push stories at people that are going to trigger strong emotions, particularly anger and fear and so on. And people then often unthinkingly share and like content that they haven't even looked at. They don't know whether it's based on fact or not. You see that in Christchurch, but you see it with anti-vaxxers, you see it with health stories, with all sorts of things. So what we want to do is try to put in something that makes people think, what is this about? Why is this being targeted at me? Make them stop and think for that split second before they like or share something into their networks. So partly what we're doing is building a system where people are going to be able to, there'll be a kind of a signal on it that will tell you why this has been targeted at you. Is there a particular emotion that this thing is trying to provoke in you? How similar is this to the other content about this? How similar is this to the content that other people who are like you are actually receiving? Then there's technology in it that will look at deep fakes. So you'll be able to look and see whether the video has been manipulated in it or the audio has been manipulated. There's a reverse image search, so you're going to be able to go in and see, well, actually, has this image been used before at some time or whatever? So we're very much in the testing phase at the moment, because the way like a young man who supports the Vox party in Spain reacts to this is very different to how a grandmother in Ireland might be looking at anti-vax material and she's sharing it out of concern for her grandchildren. So we're trying to look at it with different people, but the idea is not that we have all the answers, but we get people to try to think for themselves about, why is this being targeted at me? Will I stop and think for a second before I like or share it?
In terms of that, I mean, I don't know anyone who hasn't actually fallen victim to sharing on something that suddenly stirred their emotions, whether they didn't, if they took a deep breath and waited 5 minutes and maybe read a bit more, they mightn't have done it. Is this something that we should be teaching in schools, Jane? Is this something we should be teaching at an early age in terms of, a healthy cynicism?
Yeah, and
Sorry,
well, you want to jump in first?
Yeah,
Go
sure.
it.
Yeah, so it's part of kind of the critical thinking thing. I think yesterday it was interesting. The president had young people from who were talking about philosophy, and a lot of that was actually around critical thinking. And he said to them that these ideas were so useful, and I think it's useful. So we're working with like a company in Portugal doing some testing around, is it interesting to build games for kids and let them see how easy it is to build disinformation? Other games where you can actually get kids to try to spot which story is disinformation. So just get them trying to think in that way, that not everything they see will be right, but also not completely undermine their confidence, because the likes of Trump, for example, around, well, all media is fake news. The idea of that is to get people to trust nothing. So what you have to do is be able to walk that line between understanding what it is you should trust and what you shouldn't trust, rather than just building a general cynicism to all materials. So that's the kind of delicate line that we need to try to get to.
And to pick up on everything that Jane said, like I think in terms of tackling this misinformation, disinformation war that we find ourselves in, it is three-pronged. There are technology solutions where we use machine learning to get ahead of it, to find those hoax accounts, those bad actors, and remove them and downrank them from our experiences online. But there is, of course, then human intervention. We do need fact checkers. We need quality journalism. We need journalists stepping back in a moment and doing that transparent journalism of what we know and what we don't know, why is this a hoax? Why should you not share something with your friends and family? That's short, medium term stuff. But to Jane's point, there's a long term investment here. Unfortunately, misinformation, spewing lies is part of the human condition. We've always suffered from it. It's always going to be here. It's to what degrees is it going to accelerate? And so inoculating kids is critical. And you look a lot at research, it is from the age of 12 that we have to think about giving them the critical thinking skills. And sometimes it's going to be basic, like who, what, where, when, how, why, but a lot of the time it's going to be giving them the tools, the skills to be that person who steps back, does a little bit of research, the verification, the debunking, and they've pride in that, that they can then go to their social circles and say, don't trust that, and here's why you should share this, read this instead.
But I think one of the great things about Jane's approach and what Áine said there is we're thinking about supply and demand here. We were so concentrated on stopping the supply of misinformation, we forgot that it's about like ourselves. Training ourselves. And I think one of the things missed a lot of the times is that this is a global health crisis, right? This is, and Tristan Harris is a former Google ethicist, go and check him out. He talks about a social climate change because the world has been wired over the past 10 years to essentially be manipulated. And so in many ways, we're in this point now where we realize that cigarettes were bad for us. It's the 60s and 70s. And yet there's still people in the corner giving out free cigarettes to kids, right? And there's nothing else. So fundamentally, the platforms, which at the moment are the major distribution of news channels, are wired with a set of incentives, advertising, and with a set of algorithms which are completely opaque to the ordinary person. So we need rewiring of those systems. It's not enough to tell people, smoking's bad for you, broccoli is good for you. We know that, but we need now to start building new systems that allow people to make conscious choices so that every day their information intake is about their best intentions, who they want to be as a person, and not trading on their weaknesses, on the fact that they do have a tendency to like things that make them feel good, because that's the way the system is rewired. So we talk a lot about regulation, we talk a lot about reform. Think about rewiring these systems and supporting people who try to help you there, because we are still at the beginning. And I fear that a lot of what we're doing right now is responding knee-jerk to the worst excesses that we see on social platforms, and we're giving power to politicians when we need something far more global and far more expert, and again, giving power to individuals rather than giving it to governments.
So what is the answer there? Like when you think about it, in the aftermath of Christchurch, you saw Australia come out with very strong laws against, if that would really target, say, companies like Facebook. I think both you and Áine, you worked in Twitter. Áine, you worked in Facebook. From your perspective, what is the answer then? If it's not for governments, who can solve this problem in terms of making it, not knee-jerk and more constructive and building a better future?
Well, I just want to say, and I don't know how you feel about this, I'm sick and tired of a lot of the people coming out of platforms, jumping on the platforms and criticizing without actually doing something about it, So the way I feel about it is my responsibility, having been on the platform and not seeing this coming, is to ask why. And what I think fundamentally is the idea waiting for Mark Zuckerberg or Jack Dorsey to suddenly have an awakening is bullshit. Like, they will not change as long as the underlying incentive is advertising. They can't, right? Now, they may reform at some point, but right now, waiting for Facebook to do something about this problem, I think, is naive. Secondly, putting power in the hands of individual nation-state politicians is also a real mistake. Like, I remember interviewing a politician in my primetime days, and they said that Twitter, like the fundamental misunderstanding of politicians of technology right now is quite scary. So to give them the power to regulate, I fear, we need a World Health Organization type body that is looking after a solution in the same way that we have scientists examining climate change, doing research about the polar ice caps. We need people like Jane empowered globally with the kind of backing that they need to solve this as a world health problem. Don't put it in the hands of people like Duterte in the Philippines, Trump in the United States, and even more benighted people closer to home. Let's think about fundamentally this is a global crisis, and we can't just leave it in the hands of Jack Dorsey or even Leo Varadkar. Like, it has to be something more fundamental than that.
Áine?
Yeah, what he said. But also, it is about rules of engagement. But yeah, I think having rules of engagement, I think taking it out of the hands of platforms, governments, and having that overarching body. But also, I think what you're seeing from Mark and Jane is an underpinning that this can't be solved alone by platforms or technology companies or media companies. This is going to take the biggest collaborative effort of our time from all of those companies, from journalists, from researchers, from data scientists, machine learning engineers, from teachers who are profoundly passionate of the idea of news literacy programs, but also librarians. Like, we do have to get creative in this space. When I was in Facebook, I used to be inundated with librarians coming to me, telling me, I'm not sure it's correct, but constantly telling me there are more libraries in the United States than there are Starbucks, but they wanted to help. They saw they were a utility in their communities. Why not use us in this moment when it comes to the power of social and technology and journalism? So yeah, it's going to have to be collaborative, and it's going to take that massive, overarching, creative idea.
Jane?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think there's already the beginning of signs of it. So the UN has been looking at it. Myself and a colleague, Áine, have been speaking at a couple of events there, also the OECD. So I think a lot of the governments, and especially a lot of the kind of civil servants around this, realise that it's not actually something that can be solved by the nation state, or even necessarily by the EU, although a lot of people are kind of putting some hope in the DG COM in Europe. But yeah, I think this kind of multilateral institution in the UN or the OECD, the problem is then how much power does it have? So the World Health Organization has a certain amount of power. They can say things, but there's a lot of things that they can't actually do as well. So I think we need to look at that, and certainly an organization like that won't, for example, break up Facebook. And when you look at the move to closed messaging and the dangers of a lot of news now traveling around on WhatsApp, you know, it's going to actually need to be an American or a European regulator who's actually going to say, okay, Facebook can no longer own WhatsApp. That's going to have to be broken. And this idea of melding the back ends to make that difficult, actually, this has got to stop.
If
So
only we
there's
had a data
existing
commissioner.
regulators who have to do this. If only we had a data
Commissioner,
commissioner.
yeah. In Ireland,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Is that the answer,
Useful.
though? When you think about it, if you talk about the breakup, say, of Facebook or WhatsApp, there is that problem where, I mean, Mark Zuckerberg has talked about creating more private social network, but we're seeing the situations where I've heard of people being massacred in Mexico or in Myanmar, basically because a rumor got out on WhatsApp. I mean, could we be forcing people down a tunnel here?
I think a problem is the migration. We are seeing a lot more people leaving social platforms to search for their news. I was just looking at a study that I did at the FT, which says, you know, only 25% of news consumers think social media will be a channel for news in the future. Now, a vast majority of journalists overplayed it. So it does seem people are moving to places where they're a bit more comfortable. They don't have the toxic environment around them. They know who's in the group. They have something in common with them. It's a smaller group of people, and that's where the vectors are. So what we need to do, I suppose, is activate a bunch of people who will say, you know what, Uncle Frank is sharing racist videos again. I'm going to be the antidote. And I think this is what the project that Jane leaves is, you know, like, just, you know, you have to say things in your groups of people to stop this. Like, my daughter is, you know, like the daughter of a person who founded an organization dedicated to fact-checking is into conspiracy theories because it's been served up. Every time the moon landing is researched, it's the fake moon landing. My son the same way. So I'm desperately worried about her capacity to be a vector for truth and give her the tools to do this. And I feel that's part of the solution is they will go to these places, you know, and it will be TikTok and it will be whatever new social platform some young person in a basement in Myanmar is coming up with at the moment. The platforms will change, but the fundamental weakness of people being manipulated by these tech companies won't. So we need to give our children the superpower and the awareness to know, I can do something. I have agency. And that's what we need to teach our kids as much as I can spot fake news. It's once I spot it, what am I going to do about it? I'm not going to sit here waiting for Uncle Frank to start sharing the racist video again. I think that's part of a much more proactive strategy we have to adopt. But we also need to break, and one piece of regulation I do agree with is we need to break up the dominance that particularly Facebook has. I can leave Facebook, I can leave Instagram, I can't really leave WhatsApp. And that's a fundamentally dangerous state of affairs in the world today.
Final question for all of you, because we've about a minute left, but will we look back at this as a time, or is it something that's going to consume our lifetimes to solve?
Sorry, said that?
Will we look back at this as a phase in time and an era we had to go through, or will it still be something we'll be talking about in years to come?
Yeah, this is the moment, the crossroads, the moment of correction. But I think the signals are there that the moment is here for people to take the control in the power of their hands. But equally, from the industry that we love, the journalism industry, see, yeah, the power is there to reconnect, build those individual relationships. But it's going to move at the speed of trust. That's what we're looking at here. It has to be trust is fundamental to everything that we do from here on out.
Jane?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I hope so. And it's interesting because the other huge global challenge is, of course, climate change. And, part of this is actually around disinformation around climate change and understanding that we can have power to actually demand that politicians need to take action. And I think it's a kind of a twin thing. I think the two things work together. So I'm really hoping, for the sake of my children, that we act to have a clean information environment, and we act to have a cleaner climate environment as well. So both climates are improving.
One hope I have is we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. The internet is a fantastic tool. It makes us smarter, better, it achieves progress. The democratic revolution of the open web was hijacked by platforms that didn't have our interests at heart. Let's remember this time as when we took back the democratic potential of the internet and we built new systems, and we look back in the 10 or 15 years while this was happening and going, wow, that was a dangerous detour, but thank God we all realized that social media is not evil, the internet is great, and we found ways to actually live out that reality. That's what I want for my kids.
Okay, guys, thank you so much. That was a wonderful panel, so thanks again.
Thank you.